Welcome back to the Mad Genius Thesis, where we try to sort out the connection between creativity and mental illness. Today, we're diving into the life of Howard Hughes, a man who, I think, perfectly embodies that very concept.
Yeah, Hughes's story really shows how brilliance and struggle can go hand in hand, and how they're connected in ways that might surprise us.
Totally. To kick things off, I want to just jump right into a scene to give you a sense of just who Howard Hughes was. Picture this. It's the 1970s. Hughes is one of the richest men in the world, but he's holed up in a dark hotel room. His whole world is just this tiny little space, and he won't let anyone in. Not even his doctors. He's just completely terrified of germs.
That image of Hughes all alone and just totally consumed by his anxieties, it's kind of what we always think about when we talk about him, later in life. But to really get how he got there, we need to rewind a bit, go back to the beginning.
Yeah, okay, so let's rewind. Hughes wasn't exactly born struggling, was he?
No, not at all. He was born into privilege. His father had made a fortune in oil. But even though he was rich, his childhood was anything but ordinary. His mom, Aline, was really anxious about his health, constantly worried that he'd get sick.
So those anxieties, that super focus on like being clean and healthy, maybe that's part of what led to his phobias and weird habits later on.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. Those early experiences, they stick with us, right? They shape how we see the world. And then there's his dad, Howard Hughes Sr. He was a brilliant inventor. He actually developed this revolutionary drill bit that completely changed the oil industry. He was known for taking apart machines just to figure out how they worked, and it seems like Hughes picked up that trait too.
So it sounds like that drive to understand how things work, almost like an obsession with figuring things out, that was in his blood from the start.
Yeah, I think so. But with that kind of inheritance comes a certain pressure, right? To live up to his father's success. But Hughes was still young when tragedy hit. Both his parents died within a few years of each other, leaving him a huge fortune and probably a lot of grief.
Oh, wow. Can you imagine being a teenager, suddenly having all that money and responsibility and freedom all at once? It seems like a recipe for both incredible success and maybe some spectacular failures.
Exactly, and that's exactly what we see with Hughes. He dove headfirst into filmmaking, aviation, business, always pushing the limits. It's like he had to prove himself to make a real impact on the world.
And he definitely did make a mark. He broke aviation records, right? Pushed the boundaries of technology with his company, Hughes Aircraft.
Yeah.
And then there's Hollywood. He directed and produced these epic movies like Hell's Angels, famous for those crazy aerial stunts.
Oh yeah, Hell's Angels was just massive, totally unheard of for the time. And Hughes was a perfectionist. Like, he'd demand endless takes. He pushed his crew to the limit. He even designed and built special cameras just to film those aerial shots. That shows you both his engineering skills and how dedicated he was to his vision.
He clearly wasn't afraid of taking risks, to put everything he had into his projects. But as he became more successful, we start to see those cracks appear.
Yeah, his fear of germs got worse. It started affecting his relationships and his ability to just function in the world. He pulled back from public life more and more. He relied on a small group of aides to handle everything for him.
There's this story in the book Howard Hughes, His Life in Madness by Donald L. Barlett and James B. Steele, about Hughes moving from one bungalow to another at the Beverly Hills Hotel. He wrote this super detailed memo, like pages and pages long. It outlined exactly how his things should be moved, right down to the placement of each toothbrush, how his clothes should be folded. It's like he was trying to control everything around him, every little detail.
That need for control, that obsession with order and cleanliness, it just became, well, it really took over his life later on.
So he goes from these incredible highs, breaking records, Hollywood success, and then we start to see his empire crumble.
Hmm?
What happened? Was it just the pressure of running such a huge business, or was there more to it?
It's never that simple, is it? There were external pressures, of course. He was known for being difficult to work with. He micromanaged, made decisions on a whim that just caused chaos in his companies.
And those decisions had consequences. There was a Senate investigation into his wartime contracts. There were accusations of mismanagement at TWA. People started to think he was losing control of his empire.
And his aides, they became his only connection to the outside world. But in a way, they also kind of trapped him in that isolation. They shielded him from everything, did whatever he wanted, and they kept detailed logs of everything he did. It's a disturbing look into his life, controlled by his fears and fueled by drugs.
It's like they built this bubble around him where his strange behavior wasn't just tolerated, it was encouraged. And inside that bubble, these power struggles start to emerge. People like Noah Dietrich, his longtime business manager, and Robert Maheu, this ex-FBI agent, they were all vying for control.
Yeah, the dynamics within Hughes's inner circle, they were really complicated. Lots of intrigue, betrayal, loyalty was always being tested, and the balance of power was always shifting.
So as Hughes retreated further into this world he created, he became more erratic. His anxieties just got worse. And we're about to enter the twilight zone of Howard Hughes's life, where the line between genius and madness, well, gets really blurry.
As he disappeared from public life, people just kept speculating about him even more, about his mental state. The Mad Geniuses label got stuck to him, I think, and that just made people more fascinated with him and with his increasingly bizarre behavior.
Right. And you mentioned drug use earlier. Was that a factor in his decline, or was it more like a symptom of what he was already dealing with?
It's hard to say for sure, but it seems like it was a mix of things. The drugs, especially the painkillers and sedatives, they probably made his paranoia worse and contributed to those, erratic behaviors.
It's like a downward spiral. The drugs maybe help with the anxiety in the moment, but long term, they just make it worse.
Yeah, exactly. And as Hughes got more and more dependent on those drugs, his physical and mental health just kept going downhill. He wasted away, his hair and nails got super long, and he just stayed in dark rooms most of the time, watching movies over and over again, getting fixated on tiny details that most people wouldn't even think twice about.
It's kind of sad to picture him like that. It's hard to believe that's the same guy who broke all those flying records and changed Hollywood.
Yeah, it's a huge contrast, and it makes you wonder about the connection between creativity and mental illness. Was Hughes's brilliance somehow tied to his struggles? Did all that anxiety, those obsessions, did they actually fuel his achievements?
It's tempting to just draw a line between the two, right? To say that his genius came from his madness. But is it really that simple?
Probably not. I don't think so. It's way more complicated than that. There are tons of examples of creative people who had mental health issues, but there are also tons of people who struggle with the same things and don't achieve that level of brilliance.
So what was different about Hughes? Was it his environment, his upbringing, those early experiences that shaped how he saw the world?
Being wealthy definitely played a part. His money protected him from consequences that might force someone else to, face their issues, to get help. He could afford to give in to his eccentricities, to create a world where his anxieties ruled everything.
And there was that pressure to live up to his father's success, right?
Yeah.
To prove he deserved that name, maybe that constant striving, that ambition, maybe that contributed to both his successes and his downfall.
It's a weird paradox. The same drive that fueled his breakthroughs also seemed to, push him towards destroying himself.
It's a cautionary tale, isn't it? It shows that even with all the talent, all the money, all the success in the world, mental illness can still be incredibly destructive.
Yeah, definitely. And it shows how important it is to seek help, to understand that struggling with mental health, it's not weakness, it's a sign that something wrong and needs attention.
Well, and speaking of attention, Hughes definitely knew how to get it, even when he was trying to avoid it. There was that whole controversy with his supposed autobiography, which turned out to be totally made up, a hoax that just captivated the public and made the rumors about his mental state even worse.
It's like he couldn't escape the spotlight, even when he was hiding from it. And then there was that staged phone interview, this desperate attempt to show he was still in control, to shut down the rumors that he was, incapacitated or even dead.
It totally backfired, though, didn't it? It just made things worse.
Oh, yeah. It became this huge media circus. Everyone was analyzing his voice, his words, trying to figure out what was really going on. And the more he tried to control the story, the more it got away from him.
What a sad, strange chapter in his life. This man who had accomplished so much, who was once a symbol of American ingenuity and daring, was now a recluse, hidden away, surrounded by mystery and rumors.
And that's how he stayed until he died in 1976, under circumstances that were just as mysterious and controversial as his life.
And his death was just the beginning of another whole saga, wasn't it? The fight over his fortune, the Mormon will appearing out of nowhere. It's like something straight out of Hollywood.
It shows you how powerful the Hughes myth is, even in death. But before we get into that last part, I think we should step back and look at what his story tells us about being human,
Yeah.
About the whole experience.
Okay, yeah, let's break that down. What are the big takeaways? What can we learn from this deep dive into Howard Hughes's life?
Well, I think one thing that really stands out is just how complex Hughes's story is. He was full of contradictions, right? A brilliant innovator, but also this troubled recluse. He took huge risks, but also had to control every little thing. A visionary who, in the end, lost sight of his own vision. It definitely reminds us that we can't just put people into neat little boxes, especially when we're talking about creativity and mental health. There's no one way to be a genius, no set path to success or to madness.
Yeah, and Hughes' life really shows how important context is. His wealth, the pressure of his family's legacy, those things shaped his path.
Yeah.
They allowed him to both succeed and fail in ways that someone else might not have.
And it shows us the dangers of isolation. As Hughes pulled away from the world, his anxieties just took over, his behavior got stranger and stranger. It's like he lost touch with reality. It's a reminder that we need connection, support to feel like we belong. Those things are crucial.
Absolutely. Speaking of connection, let's talk about what happened after Hughes died.
Yeah.
It's like the drama just continued, an even stranger final act.
Right. His death set off all these legal battles over his fortune, billions of dollars. And that's where the Mormon will comes in.
Okay, for anyone who hasn't heard this story, it's wild. So this handwritten document just appears, right?
Mhm.
Out of nowhere after Hughes dies.
Mm.
And it's supposed to be his will.
And get this, according to this will, a huge chunk of his money was supposed to go to Melvin Dumar, this gas station attendant who said he had once given Hughes a ride in the desert.
Hold on. So this random guy working at a gas station suddenly becomes a potential heir to billions of dollars.
Yeah, exactly. It was a media frenzy. Dumar became a celebrity overnight. Everyone was debating whether the will was real, whether his story was true.
But there were some problems with his story, weren't there?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Handwriting experts looked at the will and said it could be a forgery. There were mistakes in Dumar's story about his meeting with Hughes, and the more people questioned him, the more his story changed.
So was it all a scam? Was Dumar just trying to get rich quick?
That was the general consensus, and in the end, the Mormon will was declared a fake. But the whole thing, it just adds another layer of mystery to the Howard Hughes story. Even after he was gone, the drama, the speculation, the blur between fact and fiction, it all just kept going.
It's like a final twist to the knife. It's a reminder that we might never know the truth about Howard Hughes, the real person behind all the myths.
Yeah, and that brings us back to our original question. Was Howard Hughes a mad genius? I don't think we can easily label him. He was a complex person who did amazing things but also struggled a lot, a product of his time, his privilege, and his own inner battles.
His story is a warning about the cost of unchecked ambition, how important mental health is, and the dangers of shutting yourself off from the world. But it's also a testament to how powerful the human spirit can be, the drive to create, to innovate, to push boundaries.
And I think that's why he's still so fascinating. Howard Hughes's life and legacy continue to spark debate. He makes us think, reminds us that the line between brilliance and madness, success and failure, it can be incredibly thin.
We've really only scratched the surface here. For those of you who want to learn more about Hughes, I highly recommend the book we mentioned earlier, Howard Hughes, His Life in Madness, by Donald L. Barlett and James B. Steele.
It's a really great read, full of details and insights that help us understand Hughes better. It reminds us that even the most extraordinary lives are made up of these small moments, choices, and events that shape us.
And as we wrap up this episode of the Mad Genius Thesis, we want to leave you with a question. What parts of Howard Hughes's story do you connect with the most? What lessons do you take away from his triumphs and his struggles? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Until next time, keep exploring the fascinating world where creativity and the human mind meet.